Well, ag property, it is often exposed to trespassers who might want to steal or damage the operation, leaving many producers wondering how far can they go in defending their personal property. Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law joins us now with some legal advice on this. All right, Roger, straightforward. What rights do farmers have here?
Well, good to be with you, Suzanne. In general, to protect property from vandalism or theft, you have a right to use as much force as is reasonably necessary under the circumstances. But you can't use force beyond what could be reasonable or believed necessary under the circumstances. And you can't use such force as is likely to lead to great bodily injury or death unless your life is threatened.
That's interesting. I know there's a lot more context to that. I have to ask you if the laws change when it comes to defending livestock or animals.
Yeah, not really. You can't use anything that would cause great bodily harm to someone else if your life is also not threatened. So on that one, you have to be careful using guard dogs to ward off trespassers. The general rule with respect to guard dogs is that you can't use any more force through an animal than you could personally. So if a guard dog injures or kills someone as an intruder, it's the same as if you had done it. And the same thing applies for a dog's dangerous propensities. You can't avoid those by posting a sign notifying trespassers of a dog's presence.
So even if they're on your property and they're coming after your operation and the dog goes after them, you're still liable?
Well, I think there's two things there in that question, Suzanne. One is whether they're harming your livestock. And the states, each state has a shooting trespassing dog statute that you have to follow pretty closely. You can't just fire away at will. If the dog is harming domesticated livestock and you catch them in the act of harming domesticated livestock, and the statutes are pretty specific that it is domesticated livestock, not wild deer, for example, that you're wanting to hunt, then you can shoot them. But you might get charged with cruelty to animals or damage to property, and you're going to have to use the statute as a defense. Now, the other aspect here, and I think this is the other question that you had in that question, and that is, what if a dog comes after me? Well, a lot of states recently have adopted what are known as stand your ground laws, which says you don't have to get away first. But again, you can't just fire away at will. You have to have a reasonable suspicion that your life is being threatened before you shoot the dog. And that's going to depend on the circumstances. And if you shoot the dog, you're probably going to get processed by the police or by the sheriff's department as, again, cruelty to animals or damage to property. And then you raise the stand the ground law as a defense. And so you're going to have to prove it. And ultimately, that's going to be decided by a jury.
Have you ever seen a case or heard of a case with an animal coming on to property, going after livestock, and the owner of that property, the owner of that livestock, having to come in contact with these dogs that are attacking their livestock? Any situations like that? And again, the right to go after that dog.
Yeah. Indeed, I have a couple of cases that I talk about in my treatise that I teach students with, that both of them come from the state of Montana, incidentally, and one resulted in a cruelty to animal charges to the rancher because he shot a miniature Pomeranian and a miniature Dachshund that he claimed were harming his sheep. That just wasn't believable by the jury. Another instance, the court didn't buy it at all. The jury didn't buy it. Another instance was a dog that got into a chicken coop and was shot after having devoured all of the chickens, and there was only one $2.50 chicken left. And the owner of the dog, and it was a very expensive dog, said, "You had no right to do that." And the court said, he caught him in the act of harming domesticated livestock, and poultry under the state statute fit the definition. And so he was fine. So it just depends on whether you have done it according to what your state law says.
Well, they better know the laws before they go ahead. I guess that's the moral of the story here. Brush up on what you can do and what your state allows.
Well, and also don't just shoot, shovel, and shut up. That's not a good approach.
Roger, that sounds like a T-shirt, by the way. Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.